So the first revision video I'm going to do is going to be about sustainable management case study for the New Forest. So the New Forest is a deciduous woodland. So the first thing you're going to do is make sure your knowledge organiser is in front of you, and you are going to label the New Forest as a deciduous woodland. If you were asked about a tropical rainforest, you would write about the Amazon. But as I've said, we're just going to focus on our deciduous woodland today. So before I practice the 8 mark you can see at the top, I'm going to use the knowledge organiser to make a couple of flashcards. So this case study is split up into 3 sections. We have the problems, the sustainable management, and the sustainable use. So sustainable management refers to how we can actually look after and stop deforestation in the New Forest. Sustainable use is what we can do when we visit there to make sure we're not damaging the area too much. So I can start off with problems. So the New Forest, and I'm going to label it threats. So what is actually damaging this forest? So the first thing is that visitors trample on plants, erode pathways and grass. So visitors walk on vegetation. So vegetation is the key word I'm going to use here for some extra spag marks, and this essentially means our plants. And 92% of people travel by car. So this increases pollution. So that's not good for the natural environment if there's a lot of pollution. Then wildlife can be harmed by litter. So when we are dropping litter on the floor, wildlife can eat that. It's going to make them feel like they are full and they can die of starvation. So these are 3 threats that are caused by people in the New Forest. On the other side of my flashcard, I'm going to write about management and use. So I'm going to split it in half. I'm going to use one side for sustainable management and the other side for sustainable use. So sustainable management, when trees are cut down, we are going to replace them with native species. So when conifers are cut down, we will replace them with native species. So by native, we mean a plant that is natural to that area. Then pesticides, and our knowledge organiser says they are used sparingly. So that means they are not used a lot. So pesticides are limited. There are rules in place that say people can't use over a certain number of pesticides. Then sustainable use. One thing the New Forest has done is they have handed out a leaflet, and this leaflet explains 5 ways to protect the forest. So this educates visitors and lets them know how they should use the forest to minimise damage. Then there are sustainable transport schemes. So we've already said 92% of people travel there by car. So this is about encouraging them to use buses or perhaps cycling to reduce that pollution in the area. The next thing I'm going to do now is use my flashcard to apply it to this 8 mark question. So my question is, evaluate the different approaches used to manage the threats facing deciduous woodlands in a named region. So it's really important here that we use our case study. And remembering that in ecosystems, as well as your 8 marks, you get 4 marks for spelling, punctuation and grammar. So making sure you are using that key terminology and making sure it is spelt correctly. So the first thing we do, which we all should know, is we bug our question. So I box the command word, so evaluate means I have to give positives and negatives. Then I'm evaluating the different approaches used to manage the threats facing deciduous woodlands. So I could include what some of my threats are, so pollution or wildlife harmed. Then I could include some of my strategies. So how am I managing it? So planting native species. There is a leaflet, and we are encouraging the use of public transport. Then we need our named region. So that is the New Forest. And it's in the south of England. So to structure our evaluate answer, we absolutely need a conclusion at the end. So I'm going to pick 3 strategies, write a paragraph about each with a conclusion at the end. So paragraph 1, I'm going to write about planting native species. And in that paragraph, I would need to include evidence. So I could name a type of tree. So we're cutting down conifers, and I need to give both a positive and a negative of it. So a negative is we are still cutting down trees. It's not completely banned in the area. A positive is that we are increasing the native species in an area. That is good for biodiversity as well. Then my second strategy is going to be a leaflet. Specifically to the New Forest, it has 5 methods in it. Then I need a positive and a negative. So a positive, it provides education for people. A negative is that people may just ignore the leaflet. Giving it to them doesn't necessarily mean they are going to use it. Then the third method that I am going to talk about is public transport. So my evidence is going to be 92% of people travel by car. Then I need positive and a negative, so it would reduce pollution and specifically air pollution. But a negative is that it's not as convenient. So people might not want to use public transport to go there. It's not as easy if they are going there with their family. What I want you to do now is pause this video and give yourself 10 minutes to have a go at answering this question. So 10 minutes, have a go, then we will come back and look at how we are going to mark this question together. Okay, so by now you should have paused the video and had 10 minutes to have a go at answering it. The first thing we're going to do to mark this question is go through and count the number of keywords we have. So in a green pen, every time you have written one of the words that I'm about to write down, I want you to give yourself a tick above that word. So we could have used air pollution, vegetation, species, deforestation, sustainable, biodiversity, ecosystem. So every time you've got one of these words, give yourself a tick, and I want you to aim for a minimum of 5 of these words. The second thing I want you to check is that you have got evidence. So in each paragraph now, I want you to look for a number or a specific name of the place. And you should have this in every one of your paragraphs. So 3 paragraphs, you should have 3 numbers and names. The next thing I want you to look at is your conclusion. Does it have your opinion and why? The why is really important here. You can't say overall we're looking after the forest well if you haven't told me why and given an example. You can't say we're not looking after the forest well enough if you have not given an example. So I want you to go back and look for this why. If you don't have it, you can add it in now. Then I want you to count the number of times you've used a connective. Every time you use a connective, it makes it really, really obvious to the examiner that you are explaining what your point is. So have you used the word because? Have you used the phrase this means that? Have you used the phrase due to? So go back through, you should have at least 1, aiming for 2 connectives per paragraph. And if you've got all these things, then you have written a good 8-mark answer.